very difficult for me to believe that we've already come to the end of our 4 weeks together in the canonical phase of this general chapter. What an experience to come in this afternoon and see this great hall where we have prayed, pondered, discussed, and taken decisions transformed into a cathedral for our Eucharist. Throughout this chapter, we've been accompanied by the prayers of our Mother of Perpetual Help, especially through the presence of the pilgrim icon blessed by Pope Francis, which has graced our aula. It is fitting that we celebrate this closing Eucharist in her honor as we give thanks to God for the grace of these days together. We're also blessed today, as I mentioned, with the presence of our confreres in the province of Thailand, who have hosted us throughout this month with incredible hospitality, and also with the presence of our confrere, Bishop Philip. As we listened a moment ago to the Word of God proclaimed this afternoon, I could not help but think of the themes and images which have returned again and again in our discussions these weeks. Themes and images we now find reflected in our message and in our theme. In his first retreat talk, at the beginning of our chapter, Cardinal Taglier spoke to us about solidarity with the poor, especially in the context of mercy, tender mercy. As Jesus invited Thomas to touch his wounds so that he could believe and proclaim, so Cardinal Taglier challenged us to touch the wounds of Jesus in our world today so that we too can believe and proclaim redemption, the Redeemer. Our experience here in Pattaya reminded us of our fragility and vulnerability. Here at this center, as we move from our rooms to this meeting place, to the dining room, it has become just as normal to see someone in a wheelchair and say, "Sawadee krap," as it is to see someone walking upright and say, "Good morning." And we have visited the children's home and children's village, the drop-in center, the school for the blind. We've seen wonderful solidarity among and with poor, vulnerable, disadvantaged, and yet extremely able young people. What a gift that has been for us to celebrate a chapter in this context and to have them remind us day after day why the Redeemer has called us to follow him. More than this, our horizons virtually exploded in our prayer in the evening sessions as we saw the world from a wider and wider perspective. We encountered the people of Haiti, still recovering from the earthquake, now facing the aftermath of Hurricane Matthew. We prayed with the people of the Philippines in the wake of that typhoon 3 years ago, which continues to leave scars in the land and especially in the people. We walked with our confreres in Ukraine in a time of war as they bring comfort, healing, reconciliation, strength to many who are feeling quite alone, abandoned on the front lines. We reflected on the woundedness of our common home, the earth, especially in the light of Laudato Si. And we experienced a vulnerability, woundedness that goes beyond our immediate horizon and context. In our conversations here in this aula, we listened respectfully to the vulnerability of confreres and of lay partners. We did this many times when we talked about community life, as we reflected on our mission, as we considered what might we have missed in our working document, as we spoke about the academy. When we listened to our lay partners and brothers, some of whom told us stories of the wounds they have experienced from fellow redemptorists. We recognized our common vulnerability, which is a powerful source for real solidarity in tenderness and mercy, because they are not them, the other. We begin to recognize that we are one, that we are so deeply united in that womb of God, deep interiority of God, that when one suffers, all feel the pain and are moved to a solidarity which goes beyond the limits we are tempted sometimes to set. What a model of this solidarity we have in Mary, Mother of Perpetual Help. She was wounded, and she touched the wounds of Jesus directly. In the first reading we heard from the book of Revelation, we see in the woman crying out in the pains of hard labor an image of Mary giving birth to our Redeemer and plentiful redemption. As the woman fled into the wilderness, so Mary fled with Joseph into Egypt and knows what it means to be a refugee and a migrant. Having stood beneath that cross, she touched the wounds of Jesus, helpless to solve the problem, but accompanying him in that moment. And she received his lifeless body, the body of her son, into her lap as she prepared him for burial. Striking that in that moment, she also experienced a solidarity that we sometimes overlook, that standing near her was the disciple whom Jesus loved. And Jesus says to her, "Behold your son," and to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And in that solidarity in suffering, in that moment when all might have seemed lost, relationships are transformed and a new communion begins to live in the world. Having stood beneath the cross, Mary became a witness to the Redeemer, risen and present. She gathered in communion of prayer and hope in the upper room with those disciples. She continues to pray with us, and she is given to accompany us on our journey. We are reminded of the opening words of the message. to touch the wounds of Jesus. In solidarity for mission, we're reminded of the words of our theme, that we are called to be witnesses of the Redeemer, in solidarity for mission to a wounded world. These words, this theme, come from our experience. It is an experience of vulnerability which leads to that solidarity, which is communion with one another, with the poor, with creation. Tomorrow and over the next few days, we are sent forth from this Eucharist to a wounded world. We go with enthusiasm and hope. We go forth in solidarity and communion. We go as witnesses to the ends of the earth. As one missionary body, brothers and priests, sisters and lay partners, we proclaim that message of tender mercy and plentiful redemption. And we know that we do not go alone. We go together as one. Thanks be to God for the grace of these days, and we thank our Mother of Perpetual Help for accompanying us and being such an icon of what it means to be a missionary to a wounded world.